No one underestimates the size of the task ahead for Labor, least of all Labor itself. Earlier, I spoke with the party's Queensland President, Andrew Dettmer. Andrew Dettmer, everyone expected Labor to be booted out of office, but no one expected the defeat to be so resounding. Why did Queenslanders turn off Labor with such conviction?
Well, I think there's a number of factors, and I think that right now it's very important for Labor as a party, as a movement, to analyse those reasons and not simply go into some sort of recrimination fest. We need to make sure that what we do is analyse these results so that we can rebuild our party and deal with the issues that have been raised by the fact of this result. Was
one of the reasons the negative campaign that was run?
Well, I think that the negative campaign didn't help. I think the negative campaigning, especially after the CMC clearance of Campbell Newman, was a mistake. It's something that I believe was negative not just for the Labor image, but also it was negative for the perception of Labor. And I think what really drove home that message was when the campaign ads, which came out saying, well, effectively Campbell Newman's going to win, don't give him too big a majority, that really ran up the white flag, and I think it gave licence to those people who otherwise may have supported us to turn around and say, well, I'm going to get with the winning team. And I find that that part of the campaigning strategy a little hard to contemplate, let alone understand why it would have been done.
So the people who were responsible for that campaign, should they remain in their jobs?
Well, as I said, it's a time for analysis. It's a time for making sure that we don't repeat these mistakes. And for us, I think if there are people to take responsibility for that, well then that will occur after that analysis rather than in some sort of, as I say, recrimination fest.
With as few as 7 members in the Parliament, how does Labor rebuild now?
Well, one thing that I've said and said very clearly is that the time for factions and factionalism is over. That was a luxury we could afford when there was a large number of MPs in the state Parliament, and I say this as a former convener of the left faction. We cannot afford that. We need to get together as a party. We need to rebuild the party from the base. We need to be talking about the way that our party is operating. We need to talk about how we can make a difference in respect of working people's lives. We need to talk about how we can make a difference politically in the big questions that confront Australia. We have, after all, huge levels of development in this state, and that development is occurring in a way that is not bringing regional Queensland with us.
Labor without factions, that's a seismic shift, isn't it?
Well, it's something that I'm throwing down the challenge to my colleagues to say that we need to be operating together. I mean, after all, if there are only 7 people in the Parliament, what are we going to have, a faction of 1? I don't think that really works for anybody, and as I say, it's a luxury we can no longer afford.
Does there need to be a major change in any policy directions?
I think that some of the policies, clearly, for instance, privatisation, were wrong, and they need to be looked at. We need to be the party of working people. We need to be the party of people who want a fair and equitable society. We need to be the party that is going to provide people with hope and about a different Queensland, and not one which is simply beholden to the dollar and to those people who've got the most money. And I think that Labor has to revert to its roots, if you like, to ensure that we are actually representing those views, and we no longer have policy set from on high, which effectively provides solace to the big end of town through issues such as asset sales, but we need to actually have the capacity for that policy to be worked on by working people, by affiliated trade unions, by community groups and others, and we need to make sure that those people are part of the Labor family. They don't feel that they are part of that at the moment.
There's been a bit of commentary about what the implications are for the federal government. Peter Beattie says federal MPs need to spend a lot more time here, that Julia Gillard should buy a house in Queensland. Is there a message to federal Labor in the Queensland result?
I can't imagine that perhaps Peter Beattie's got his house on the market, but I digress. The issue is that, yes, federal MPs, especially senior federal MPs, do need to spend more time campaigning here. We get a little bit tired of the Sydney-Melbourne axis being all that is dealt with. Queensland has around, I think, 30 or 31 seats in Queensland federally, and we need to be making a very competitive showing to ensure that we can retain government. As it stands at the moment, moment we haven't seen a lot of our federal MP colleagues, it's federal ministers, and we need to make it so that federal Labor is seen around the ridges in Queensland in a whole variety of situations.
A by-election will be held when Anna Bligh resigns from her seat of South Brisbane. Would you expect to hang on to that seat?
Well, I'm hoping that we do, but I'm not. I'm also not an incurable optimist. I know that in situations such as this, as has occurred in other states, where, for instance, Jeff Kennett resigned and his seat, which was previously considered a safe Liberal seat, was returned to the Labor Party for, in fact, not one but 2 terms, even though the people of South Brisbane did not swing anything like the level of other seats. Nevertheless, it's something that I would not, and no member of our party would take for granted.
Andrew Detmer, thanks for your time.
Pleasure.